morning. This is ASMM Digital Small Business Connections. We are the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. Our goal each and every week is to give you something you can walk away with and put to work in your business. That's not always easy, but with great guests, we usually can do that. And what do I mean by great guests? We have people here who own businesses. We have people who work with business owners. We have people who can give you something that you really can put to work in your work right now. But we're also streaming live, which means it's not just us talking. You can actually come on and ask questions. That doesn't mean you have to show us your face. You actually can't do that, but you can leave a comment in the comments of Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, and we'll see it and we can answer your questions. So our guest today, Orla Quinn, who is a relationship coach, can do that. Orla is coming to us all the way from Ireland. Welcome, Orla. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Anne.
Do you want to let them in on a secret and tell them what we've just done and what just happened?
Well, we had a trial run, didn't we?
We did. We had about 8 minutes of talking and then realizing it's not going out to a single soul. So we started over. And sometimes you have to do that. So I want to talk a little bit. What we're going to talk about today is how you chose relationship coaching, why you like it, and why you're good at it. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, I can. So as I was saying before, I have had a kind of many different careers in my past. Starting with teaching, I was a qualified and experienced teacher for many, many years in sort of primary, different levels like primary, secondary. So I taught many different age groups of children. And I loved it. Like I loved more the classroom management side of things and kind of just working, on the relationship side, working with children helps help them personally develop, rather than the curriculum side, And
right.
But I suppose I got a bit disillusioned with that because of those certain restrictions around the curriculum. Anyway, I left that, went into human rights education more specifically, because I think as well at that time that was starting to really interest me, where I really wanted to teach people specifically around human rights, and not just children, like adults too. And it was because of all the work that I was I had gone to the west of Africa, Gambia, on a voluntary trip, but for 16 months. It was quite a long stint, and I saw a lot of, I suppose, development issues. That it really was a life-changing situation where I saw the other side. I mean, we live in a bubble here, so just witnessing some of the human rights abuses there, I really took to then educating people around human rights specifically, and I was working with a development organization to do that. And it just, I suppose more and more, I just got interested in power. I got interested in really studying power dynamics and relationships, and how at the core of every conflict that I was witnessing, through the human rights work that I was looking at, it was all to do with the abuse of power. And I just went on a kind of a there is an academic in me, so I studied it. I did an MA in sociology, and I really wanted to study this. And it really sort of came down to relationships and how important relationships are. And so it's not hard to see that any tyrant out there has had bad relationships, has had bad examples of role models in their lives, Right. So anybody that is abusive, they haven't had good role models. So it's really important that we establish healthy relationships, respectful relationships. And so that's what I like to, I suppose that's the bigger picture. And then more specifically, I realized that, the core relationships are so important. So that's the relationship with your partner, the relationship with your parents, your children, like that's where it all starts. So right. I wanted to go to the start. And I'm, as a business owner as well, I'm conscious as well that I feel like I can also help those people who have then their relationships in business. And we can talk about that, Anne, because this is really important as well. How you
Exactly.
relate to people in your home is, can definitely reflect on how you relate to people in your workplace.
Absolutely. And what I was going to mention, you had mentioned earlier that you grew up in Northern Ireland and you watched relationships there because you were either on one side or the other. And if you were on one side, you didn't like the other. You did not just like the other side, you didn't like the other people. And as you were saying that, it occurred to me that when I started this business, and by the way, I am going to turn this will be explicit because I'm going to use one single bad word, but they will make it explicit. But I have to use it because it does matter. When I first started this business and people were rude to me for the first time, I had been a mom, I had been a writer. And when you're a writer, you don't actually see people. You don't actually work with people. You don't have to deal with people having their own shit. And that's what it was. I suddenly realized people had their own shit. And so as you were talking, and I was thinking about marriages in particular, and parenting and all of that, we all come to a relationship with our own histories. We all come with our own baggage. So you had talked earlier about you have to start here and then work there, right? Then work together. So I love the idea that a relationship, and then if you run through, that a relationship starts with you, right? And your history. And then it comes together with you and your boundaries and all of, and you'll talk more about that. But then what you learn there goes through to your business, and you're again using those same tools in your business. So I love this conversation. I think it's an important conversation.
Yes. And then it's it's super, super important because, as you said before as well, when that question, what makes a good business? What makes a good business? And people will say, oh, the marketing or all of the things. But actually what they forget is that it all comes down to relationships. Building relationships creates a successful business.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
I remember being a kid, and I don't know if in Ireland they say this, but they used here, it's something they say a lot, which is it's all about who you know, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is something they say. It's all about who you know. And I thought that was sort of the old boy network, right? The good old boy network. And then I realized it's really not. It's about the relationships you build, even if it's something like you and I met at a BNI. You're in Ireland. I am here. You came to visit. We met. And so everybody you meet is who you know. So it's all about creating relationships wider than yourself.
Absolutely. And businesses thrive on it. I know myself that this is, it's so important that I meet people like you to spread my message, and that's about establishing relationships, building relationships, strategic partners, right? It's
right.
It's so effective in for me, reaching new clients. And for those other business owners doing the same.
Absolutely. So yeah, you can't build a business without building relationships first. So let's talk a little bit about that. So you work a lot with couples, but how do they link? If you think about the tools you're giving people in their personal relationships, how can they then take those same tools and use them in their business relationships?
Yeah, great question. So many of my clients, I guess because I'm a business owner, that I attract couples who either one of them is in a business or both. But they tend to be professional couples who have quite a demanding lifestyle, with between their career, their children. So the relationship is kind of not as prioritized, I suppose. Like establishing and keeping healthy the relationship comes lower down in the kind of the relation in the priority pecking line. So I guess what I'm there to do is just to remind them about how important it is to go back to the basics of really helping to to establish that relationship so that it does create harmony, and it stops things from unraveling and getting too overwhelming. And yeah, what I know to be true is that when you neglect the relationship in that partnership, everything else falls apart. And that's why people end up getting divorces, right? Because they end up not having any other solution. They've gone so far down the road of not resolving conflict, or not communicating properly, not sort of holding that relationship in a safe container so that it is going to be nurtured, it is going to be cared for. Then disconnection happens, conflict happens, and then almost the acceptable next step then is divorce. And I guess what I want to say to couples is that this is not the relationship. I just want to remind them that relationships are never supposed to be easy. They're not supposed to be easy.
Right.
They're supposed to be testy. They're supposed to test.
Right.
But what's really important about that is that they take the time to do the work around that. Because if you just ignore it, the small conflicts become big conflicts. And all of a sudden then you're spiraling kind of out of control. So what I would say is to make sure that the relationship is, the more you pay attention to it, right? Where attention goes, energy flows. And so it's a case of the more you concentrate and pay attention to the health of the relationship, then it won't go there. It won't go off the rails. It won't go to that place where ultimately there's no return. So,
Well, and you said, before we started, I think you talked about boundaries and a couple of other things. And it occurred to me that it all starts though with communication, right? Because you have to communicate your goals. When you first get married, when you first start dating, what are your goals? You first start dating, is your goal to eventually get married? When you get married, is your goal to grow old together? And if it is your goal to grow old together in Ireland, or is your goal to grow old and live in Jamaica? Because you have to talk about that. If my goal is to live in Jamaica and my husband's goal is to live in Ireland, that's not going to work, right? So it all starts with that. You have to talk about things like goals, and you have to talk about things like boundaries. So communication, it definitely seems to be the key for both, right? Not just your marriage, but in your business as well. Yeah. Well, I was about to say, I will sometimes say to Anastasia or to anybody who works with me, I'll say something and they're like, oh, that's not my goal. And I was like, oh yeah, that might not. Like, I may have a goal for Anastasia to be a partner with me, right? I want her to be a partner in my business. Well, she's like, oh, I don't want to do that. So it's important for me to say, it's important for us to have those conversations.
Absolutely. And not take anything for granted, right? Or not to expect anything. And this is where, communication is so important, just to keep things open and transparent, just like what you're talking about with your partner, your business partner relationship. It's about communication to keep transparency alive, active, so that when the miscommunication is there, then you have one goal and she has different goals, and that can end up then conflict down the road, right? So it's really important to communicate our needs, our personal needs. And this is something that, in relationship as well, in a couple relationship, it's really important to communicate and to communicate our own truth, right? So that means like communicating our needs, whether they're our life goals, as you get the example of, or just our intimate needs, right? So, where it comes down to, well, honey, I'm not seeing enough of you, I need more time together, or I need more touch. I'm not getting enough touch, or whatever it is, like it's really important to communicate these needs so that we don't we don't get into this place of resentment. And this is really
Right.
important, because what happens when someone doesn't fulfill your expectations, that's when we can get into resentment. And
Absolutely.
expectations is massive. I would say we all have this, like we all expect things from others, right? And
Right.
so this is what we have to be really careful around, because the more we expect from our, from our business colleague or our partner, the more we are going to be disappointed, because they are not going to meet our expectations, because they're our expectations. They're not
Right.
theirs,
And
right?
they're not mind readers, right? They're not mind
Yeah,
readers on the other end. So it's
exactly.
funny. So we've been married 30 years, and you think that after 30 years, you know everything about each other. You communicate a lot. I'm just going to air our dirty laundry. So we're about to take a vacation. And for 2 weeks, I've said to my husband, I think we should take, because this is like, we're taking a car. We don't drive often. And I said, I think we should take this car in. It's making a funny sound. We're going to drive 500 miles on it. And he has said, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. And finally, this morning, I said, I think I need you to tell me why you think it's going to be fine, because I think it's making a funny sound. And it was so funny because I think I need you to tell me. And he said, oh, because remember, 4 weeks ago, I took it in for an oil change and I had them look at it then. So they said it's fine.
Hmm.
Oh, okay. But
Yeah.
let's ask that question. Let's put it out there. Let's make it something that's not. And the same thing goes in your business, And
Mhm.
actually, I'll go back to Anastasia, who has said for months, I think everybody needs to come back into the office. And I couldn't hear what she just kept saying. I think they need to come in. I think they need to come in. I couldn't hear it. And finally, she said, Anne, every communication I have with anybody in the office is negative because they only call me if they have a problem.
Mm.
And I thought, okay, we need to come back in the office, because when you're in the office, you talk to each other. It's positive. But yeah, if you're
Mm.
not communicating, you can't find those things out. Right.
No, and and isn't that key? Isn't that so interesting that, she was experiencing those conversations being negative when they weren't, because they weren't in person anymore, because there wasn't those relationships being nurtured. And this is
Right.
actually really important, because this is exactly what I'm talking about. When they're not nurtured, when a relationship isn't nurtured, it it spirals negatively. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, honestly, let's just switch to that real quick, because that is something that you guys are facing there as well. Everybody in the world is
Hmm.
facing. We've
Hmm.
all said, oh, we're going virtual. Everything's going virtual now. And I think what we are going to miss is those relationships. The times that you're standing at the water cooler, or you're walking by somebody's office, and you have a conversation with them. If you're not nurturing those relationships, people are going to lose their employees.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, isn't that the truth? Because I mean, how many of those important conversations happen over a cup of coffee during a break? That's
Right.
when the true juicy kind of information can get shared. Um, you
Exactly.
know, as opposed to a formal board meeting. So it's so important. I mean, at the end of the day, we're people, right? And we just happen to be business people, but when you strip it back, we're still people. We're still social, animals who
Right.
need who need to be in community, who need to be communing in community. And so, yeah, I think this pandemic has really challenged all of us, and the social distancing as well. Like as a kind of a relationship coach, intimacy is so important for me to establish healthy relationships, couple relationships. And so I focus a lot on building healthy intimacy, because when it comes to touch, and I'm not, this is not for business necessarily, I'm talking about for couples, but just having touch, human touch is, I would say it's a basic human right. And we have had to deny ourselves of this very basic human right, um, where we can't hug as freely, we can't touch as freely, if it's, with parents who are, volatile or, vulnerable with COVID, other situations that have arisen where we can't just engage in the kind of touch that we've benefited from in the past, right?
Absolutely.
So, and that comes down, in business as well, when it comes to intimate conversations, not necessarily touch, because consent is, ultimately consent is super, super important. And I know that in businesses, consensual touch, is to be
Right.
expected. It should be
Absolutely.
expected.
Absolutely. So, all right, I want to go on to something that I do think is important, because when people come to you, they're not coming to you at the beginning of their relationship when everything is rosy. They're coming to you after years of having ignored the things that you've just talked about, having not spoken about the things that they needed to talk about. So how do they heal those relationships? Whether it's because there was an infidelity, whether it's because there was anger, whatever it is, whether it's just because they feel abandoned. How do you heal a relationship that has gone through something difficult?
Yeah, well, it's, it really comes down to trust, doesn't it? And, for any of those kind of examples that you gave, there's been, a betrayal of trust. That can be, if something like that has happened, whether it has been adultery or where it is just, whether there's been any kind of alteration that has caused someone not to trust the other. That has to be the starting block, is really helping establish trust again. And what can really help that process is communication, starting with communication, not to keep beating that drum, but this is really important to help to start building trust, is to start with communication and start getting the communication right, so that we are not, what happens, I suppose, in those kind of, in relationships, long-standing relationship, is that thing of expectation. Like, you just expect that person to behave in a certain way. And
Right.
so you stop having the conversations because you just assume. So there becomes this assumption. And this is really, and these bad patterns can be established so that you kind of have this dynamic of, oh, they just do it that way always.
Right.
As opposed to sitting down and have a conversation and asking a question to find out, well, why are they doing it that way? And would they do it another way if we just had this conversation?
Right.
And so I really, my first step with people is all about communication. It's all about, like, establishing this, like, healthy boundaried communication. So making sure that when I do express my needs, that they're not going to be, that the response won't be a defiant one, that it won't be a defensive one, that it won't end up in conflict because the other
Right.
person is disappointed, it feels attacked, personally attacked, or blame. Because blame is, number one, it's your fault that I'm this
Right.
way. So it's, it's something that we have to start looking at ourselves. We have to start looking, instead of pointing the finger that way, we have to really start pointing the finger in towards ourselves and just asking ourselves the question, well, why is it, why am I seeing this response? What am I doing that's causing this response? And so
Absolutely.
it does start with the self. Like, you have to start looking at how you communicate and how you relate to the people around you. Like, if you're having problems with relationships around you, you have to take that inner journey and look at your own, do a bit of self-reflection, right?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I think, it's as you were saying that, I was thinking about, I have a friend whose husband cheated on her. And this was years ago. And I remember thinking at the time, because she said she was going to do this, and I thought, I wonder how that will go. But she said the whole time afterwards, she would tell him how she was feeling. And so she was stepping out of the shower, and he walked in the room, and she says, I need you to leave, because when you look at me naked, I picture you looking at her naked. And what that did, yes, it helped her to understand what she was feeling, but it also helped him to understand, oh, this is how I've hurt her. So it wasn't this one-time thing I did. It's all these times now that she has to think about it. Right. And now it's almost 25 years later, and this couple is still together, but they worked through it by like this communication that I thought was I'm like, oh, that's a lot of communication. but it worked.
But it worked. It worked,
right.
And like, this is the thing, it's going to be relative to you. It's going to be relative to your needs. But exactly the example you gave is a beautiful example of how you can really heal, that type of a trust wound where there has been infidelity. And so you being able to communicate, well, when you do this, I feel hurt. And that's, and that's the way to communicate because of course we do, we are triggered by people around us, but it's how we communicate about this. It's not about, it's not about pushing them away. It's about showing them, being vulnerable and showing them what is going on with us, speaking our vulnerability and saying, you know what, this makes me feel uncomfortable. And this is why I'm reacting this way. And that's why I'm asking you to, to leave the room. And so that's a much kinder way to approach and to say something rather than, just get out, go away from me, right? Because that person doesn't know what's going on. They don't understand. They just see they're being pushed away. So they're a victim because they're being pushed away, And what's the response? Anger. The response is resentment. So it's really important that we start communicating in a compassionate way. So this is the non-conflict communication where we're saying, you know what, I'm not comfortable in this situation, and because I'm feeling this way, and can you give me space? And the other person, of course, will give you space when they hear that, it hurts you. They don't want to hurt you. So, yeah. I love that you shared that example. Thank you.
Yeah, when she shared it with me, I thought it was a gift to me for somebody to share something so intimate, because it is so intimate and it is so painful. But it helped me to look at my own marriage and go, so are we communicating this way? Are we communicating in a way that we understand each other? And sometimes there are times when you're married and you can kind of read the other person. But it's also good to say, so we were moving into this house or trying to move in the middle of the pandemic. And I was very cranky. And my husband said, I think you're feeling out of control. I think you're feeling like you don't have control. And I said, that's exactly how I'm feeling. Thank you. So there is that two-way communication where sometimes your spouse can see that in you, which is
yes. Yeah, beautiful.
So,
and exactly. Sometimes you can't actually communicate what you're feeling, but maybe they can. So
exactly.
That's also
and
lovely.
This goes, I'm glad we talk about it here and for relationships, but it also goes for your work relationships, because there are times that something happens and you think, oh, well, this is not going to work. This person's going to have to go. But they're valuable and you don't want that to happen. So you do have to open those lines of communication. So this is why I love having people. Even when you look at somebody, when we first met, I thought, do you belong? Will you work on the show? Is it something that will work on the show? But it will, because as entrepreneurs, we're just people. As entrepreneurs, we're still trying to live a life.
Yes, we are. And we tend to be, I think, entrepreneurs, because speaking as one, I feel like, we are very sociable people. We tend to be sociable people, so relationships are important. Relationships are super important, like we said at the beginning, for our business, right? So
yes, absolutely.
we need to get them right. And when we, if we have any relationship issues, we really need to sort them out so that we can, be in this healthy relationship rather than being in this, fearful or power over, power under type of relationship. Just harmonious relationship, equal relationships with people that we work with. So yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on. So tell everybody how they can find you. I put up your website online. That's orlaquinn.com, and it's ORLAQUINN.com. How else might they find you?
Yeah, well, I'm basically Orla Quinn in LinkedIn and on Facebook. So I'm on those two platforms specifically. So, but on my website you'll see it's my 5-star program, my 5-star relationship program, and you can go in there, book a consultation with me, a free consultation. So if it is something that you'd like to work on, either for your business or for your personal relationship, I'm happy to talk with you.
And you can do this virtually as well as in person?
Sure, yeah, I work with couples virtually, and yeah, and in person, although I haven't lately. So I'm looking forward to getting back to that.
I know it'll be nice when we're back in person for
Yeah.
real. I think my son had camp all last week, so with real people, which was very nice.
Wow, wow!
So,
I know, it's so exciting, isn't it?
it is. I got to hug people a couple of weeks ago. I got to hug people in an event. I was very happy to just be around people again. So, all right, hold on one second. Don't you go away. I just want to remind people what we have coming up. All right. So next week in the United States, it's the 4th of July. So I am taking a vacation. We will not be here. I think we're going to run an older show, and I'm so sorry. I have no idea which one it is. Whitney will pick it out for us and put it up, and that'll be wonderful. Starting September 1st, we are going to switch from this format. So we will not be interviewing people after September 1st. September 1st, Anastasia and I will start with marketing moms, and we're really just going to talk about all the things your small business needs to know about marketing, because what happens is we get a lot of phone calls from people who can't necessarily afford to hire an agency, but they need help, and we want to offer them that help in a way that is human. We cannot stand when people start talking about SEO and SEM and SERP and things that people are like, what the heck is that? We want to talk to you in a human way. That's what the show is going to be about. Marketing moms. That will be starting in September. But until then, we do have some great guests. So do keep tuning in. We hope that you'll leave us a review. Let us know how we're doing. And if you have any comments, we hope you'll leave those in the comments on either Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. We'd really, really appreciate that. Let me come back. There's Orla. Orla, thank you so much for coming on. I truly appreciate it.
Oh, you're so welcome. And yeah, it was such a joy connecting with you again.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, everybody else, we will see you in a couple of weeks. Bye-bye.